Hello everybody and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. Hope you're all very well. Say hi to me in the comments if you want to say hello. What are we here to do today? Well, if you haven't been before, Tech Tuesday is all about one of me or one of my colleagues coming in and helping you out with all things Olympus, OMD and OM system. So if you are new, settle back, put some questions in the comments, ask anything you like. Let me know where you are, who you are, and I shall hopefully be able to say hello to you along the way. Now, of course, all Tech Tuesdays have a focus, and today's focus is on 4 lenses with 2 focal lengths. So what we're going to do today is do a sort of gentle comparison between the 45mm f1.8 and f1.2 lenses and the 25mm f1.8 and f1.2 lenses as well. And then maybe, if we're very lucky, we'll do a little live comparison with one of the cameras. So I'm going to quickly say hello to some people in the comments. It's a really nice way for us to settle into a Tech Tuesday. So let's see who's in there right now. And remember as well, I'm on my own, so I'm clicking loads of different things here. Hopefully it'll be nice and smooth. We'll see how we get along. Kirsty's in there. Hello, Kirsty. Good to see you, Kirsty. And we've also got Susie as well. Good to see you too. We've got Steve Williams and Yvonne. Good to see you all. So I'm broadcasting from the UK, but we have also got people from all over the world. Hello, Steve from Florida. Great to see you as well. Malin, there's a familiar name. Always nice to see you in Malin from Perth in Western Australia. Some other familiar names that I like to see in here. Here's Louise, who's in there from Canada as well, and Les from what is a cold, dull Derbyshire. Well, believe it or not, it's actually a very cold, dull Cambridgeshire as well at the moment, Les. So wherever you are, I hope you are nice and warm inside. I do apologize if I can't say hello to everybody. I do try, and I will say hello as we go further along as well. But this is a Tech Tuesday, so the important thing is that we get onto some tech. And of course, with every Tech Tuesday, even though we've got to focus on these lenses today, you can also put any questions in the chat, whether you're on YouTube, watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on Facebook, pop a question in the chat, and I'll do my very best to answer it. Sometimes our community answers them together, so you might get to it before I do. But if you don't, I will try and work my way through. And it doesn't have to be about the lenses. It can be about the cameras as well. And also, please remember that I'm a little bit in the future. I'm about 20 or 30 seconds in the future. So catching comments for me can take a little bit of a second to catch up. Okay. So what are we here to do today? Well, we're going to look at some of these lenses. And I've got a couple of those lenses right in front of me that we can take a look at now. I'm going to give you an overhead view of them in a moment. But I just want you to introduce to size-wise so you can get an idea of what they're like. I've got the 45mm f1.2 lens, and I've got the 45mm f1.8 lens. I'm just going to pop these down on my desk in front of me, and I'm going to go ahead and there we go. The joys of working live. I'm going to switch on my overhead camera, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this in for you just here. There we go. So these are those 2 lenses that we've just had a little look at on the main camera. This is my 45mm f1.2. and my 45mm f1.8. Now, let's put the 1.2 to the side for the moment and talk about the f1.8. Now, what I'm going to do quickly, actually, let's just change this feed here so that you can just see my face as well. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to talk to you. So the 45mm f1.8, what a fantastic little lens this is. Now, for years, this was actually my favorite portrait lens. And I would probably dare say many others would say it was their favorite as well. So it's, for the size and the budget of this lens, it's absolutely phenomenal. What I love about this lens is it is tiny. Okay, so we're running an f1.8 45mm lens. Now that 45mm is a 90mm crop equivalent. So if we're talking about 35mm terms, then this is a 90mm crop equivalent, which is a really fantastic portrait lens. Sort of 85, 90mm is absolutely fantastic. One of the greatest things about this one is that it is so small. So if you're carrying around a lighter body, perhaps an EM10 or an EM5, then this is an ideal companion. Not to say that you can't put it on an EM1 series camera. Of course, yes, you can. But it fits really, really well if you do want to move about and go light. Now, let's just take my head out of the scenario so I can put this down here. So what we want to look at initially is we're going to look at some of the things that these lenses offer us. And there are some major differences between this and the 45 1.2, which I will talk a little bit more about in a second. But what I want to do is I want to tell you the kind of technical specifications of this lens. Now, this is the black version. Of course, this particular lens, the f1.8 lens, does come in black or silver. The build on this one is a polycarbonate build. So unlike the Pro lenses, which are a metal build, this one's a polycarbonate. This helps to keep it really, really nicely in that kind of price range that it is at the moment. It does come with a removable decoration ring on the front, so you can twist this off, and this allows for an outside thread, an external thread, onto which you can fit either a lens hood or a couple of the converters, the con products that we produce, because we do a macro converter and a few others. They can go on here, and then of course if you're not using those, you can pop the decoration back on and it makes it look nice and tidy. Now, this lens is designed, you wouldn't think of it if you were to look through it, because if you have a little look through here, you can see that it's absolutely marvelous. And to kind of a normal eye, this would obviously just be one piece of gloss. And of course, it isn't. All lenses are made up of separate elements and in different groups. Now, this one is made of 9 elements across 8 groups, which means there are 9 lenses inside there, and at least 2 of them are fixed together to create one group. Now, we get a 27-degree angle of view from 45mm, and that's going to be about the same on the 1.2 version as well. And your aperture blades in here, there are 7 aperture blades, and they're on a circular diaphragm, which realistically what that means is that we should be getting nice circular bokeh from the resulting wide open aperture. So 7 blades in a circular diaphragm. Now, the closest focus on this lens is 50 centimeters or 0.5 meters. Now, all of your lenses will tell you what their close focusing distances are. Written on the lens just here, you'll see distances in meters and in feet. So it doesn't matter which values you work to. You've got 0.5 meters or 1.64 feet to infinity. So the closest point are these numbers here and until infinity. And of course, there's your red dot that you will use to line up on the camera. Your filter thread on this little 45mm is a 37mm filter thread. So that's the internal filter thread of this lens, will require a 37mm filter. So if you're going to use things like polarizing filters, or if you have adapters for things like neutral density filters that need to screw in here, that's 37mm. So again, that's really, really small for a lens of any kind of nature, the 37mm, but you can get lots of filters in that thread size. Now, this lens isn't weather sealed. So let's just bring up this one here. When I say it's not weather sealed, I mean that it's not built, designed with the ratings that our Pro lenses and cameras have built within them, which is a series of O-rings and seals to stop splash, dust, and temperature ingress. This is just the standard sealed lens. So we obviously do recommend that you do take care if you're going to be using this lens in any kind of environments that may well have things like moisture and dust in them. Not to say that it's not a highly performing lens, it's just that that's something that you do need to be very, very aware of. So, and then there is no optical stabilization in this lens at all, as most of our lenses do not have optical stabilization. We have optical stabilization in the longer telephoto lenses, but in the primes, most of the primes with the exception of the 300mm, we don't have that optical stabilization because you benefit from that within your OMD body. Now, of course, if you were to link this up with something like an EM1, for example, then you're going to benefit from, this is an EM1 Mark II, so you're going to benefit from 5.5 stops of stabilization. That applies then to the lens, but not optically, just through the body. Weighs in at about 116 grams. I say it weighs in at about 116 grams. It weighs in at exactly 116 grams. And it benefits from something called zero coating. So let's talk about the coatings that we put on our lenses, because at the moment we run with predominantly 2 types of coating. We've got different types of lenses, and this is something that we're going to probably look at in a future tech session. We have things like ED lenses or super ED lenses and things like that. But when we talk about coatings, we primarily use 2 separate styles. Now, the 45mm 1.8 benefits from something called a zero coating. Okay, and the zero coating is something that's applied to the front element of those lenses. We also use something called a Z nano coating, and that's on our more pro end lenses and later lenses. And that is also applied to the front element of the lens, but in a slightly different way. So I've got a little slide here that I can show you. If it pops up, there we go. And I get to be in this one as well. So this is the slide that basically just describes to you what we put on the front of our lenses. And the zero coating is what is on the 45mm f1.8. All right. So zero coating effectively is a coating on the top of the lens, and it reduces the refraction rating. Okay, so we're talking about reducing flare, reducing ghosting and things like that. And it's a solid film coating as well, so we don't get any scratches on top of there. And that's really important. We put that on almost all of our lenses. Now, I need to find my button to scroll across to the next. Here we go. This diagram shows you our Z nano coating. Now, the Z nano coating is something that is on our Pro lenses, and it's going to be on the 45mm f1.2 lens when I show you that as well. And you can see here really nicely the differences between the standard coating and the Z nano coating. So on the left here, you've got the standard coating where the incident light is hitting your lens at an angle and reflected light is coming out, and that can usually that can sort of help things like ghosting and flares occur. Now, if you look at where the Z nano coating is, you've got a coating of nanoparticles that are all filled with air. And what they do is they reduce the refractive index. So effectively, when the incidence light's coming in, there is far less reflected light bouncing off that. So in turn, reducing the ghosting and flare by a whole amount more than the conventional coating. So we're really, really lucky to have that kind of technology that's running in these lenses. And the easiest way to remember it is that the smaller and lighter versions of both of the focal lengths that I'm going to show you today, smaller and lighter has zero coating, and the Pro versions have the Z nano coating. Okay, so I'm going to compare what I've just told you about the 45mm f1.8 to the f1.2 in a second, but I'm just going to quickly have a little run through the comments here. And obviously, remember, I'm on my own, so I'm kind of scanning through to say hi to people. We've got Gilbert in Mississippi. Fantastic stuff. I always struggle to spell that. I really should learn the way to do it. We've got Soleil, I think, is that in Finland? And we've got Barry in Stevenage in the UK. Hello, how are you all? Right, let's see if we can find some questions in there. What I might find is that nobody's had any questions at the moment because you're all desperately listening to what amazing specifications I'm going to tell you about these lenses next. Okay, we got one here from Carlos. Hello, Carlos. I hope you're well. Carlos has said that Carlos is mainly into street and wildlife, and the 25mm f1.8 lives on the camera. It's fantastic for the street photography as well, Carlos. The 25mm is such a beautiful angle to use, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Tor, fantastic. Tor's over in Australia. Hello, Tor. Good to see you. Tor has actually made a very good point. As I said earlier, I'm slightly in the future when it comes to live streaming with you all on here, but it is already Wednesday in Australia, so you are the ultimate time traveler. Thank you very much for being in, Tor. Thank you. Julie loves these lenses, and I'm assuming this is the 45mm on the EM10 Mark III. Now, of course, a lot of you will remember that at different points across the last few years, that 45mm has actually been part of a free promotion. So we've actually given it away with certain cameras, which are, you know, is amazing considering the performance of that lens. For us to be able to give it away free was fantastic. Sadly, at the moment, it's not in a promotion, but it is an excellent price. It's a really, really reasonable lens and a really high-performing one for the money. Excellent stuff. Joshua, hello, Joshua. We've all done this. The first time the decoration ring fell off the lens, you thought you'd broken it. I did that. I think I remember when I first started working with these lenses, I think nearly 10 years ago now, I thought I'd done something pretty wrong. I was going to try and hide it away in my bag before the boss saw it. But yeah, it is meant to come off. So don't worry if it does come off. Roger has asked, do you prefer screw-on filters or the Lee holder type? That's a really interesting question, actually. And I think everybody's got a different opinion on it. My personal opinion in terms of filters, and it would be things like neutral density filters when it comes to this kind of thing, is that I would prefer an adapter type because I like to be able to slide those filters in and out. There's something a little bit, for me, I just think it's a purer way of doing it. However, there are lots of filters that are more useful when they're screw-in types. You get polarizing filters and things like that. They are very useful as screw-in types. But for neutral density, for me, it's a holder type that I like to use. So you would get a screw-in filter holder. So that would go on your internal thread. So for example, on the 45mm, if you were going to use it, your screw-on holder would be a 37mm ring that holder would then clamp onto. Super good. Okay, fantastic. Just a quick scan again. Oh, here's a great one. Bernie. Bernie Corson. Hello, Bernie. Thanks for joining us today. Bernie's asked, what's the best way to clean the lens? Well, with all lenses, you do have to be super, super careful. Now, I have got one of our fantastic, albeit washed multiple times, Golden Light break-free lens cloths. These are absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful little microfiber cloth. Let's put an overhead camera on and show you exactly how to do it. The trick is just being gentle. So let me get the 45mm on here. And what I will tend to do is just wrap the cloth around a finger, and then I'm just going to wipe gently from the center outwards all the way to the edges, and then once around the edge just to pick up any tiny little dust motes that might be on there. Now, there is a little bit of stuff going on there that probably won't come off with a dry lens cloth. So what you can get is something like a lens cleaner pen. Lens cleaner pens are really, really useful. I've got mine here. This is a lens pen. It's very old, but it does the job. And inside here, there is a tiny little cleaning element that has very fine carbon on. And you can, again, gently, you can use this just to kind of go around the edges of your lens. And the key to it is just be super, super gentle. Don't spray it with anything. Don't put any moisture on it if you can get away with it. Just a nice microfiber or a lens pen with a little center to outside and then around the edges. Never touch them with your fingers, because obviously it doesn't matter how clean or how dry your fingers might be. We've all got oils in our fingers and they're going to get onto your lenses. And then a really important thing as well, let's just go back over to that camera, is don't forget that you've got a rear element there. So you've got your rear element and you've got your front element. So it's really, really important as well with your little microfiber cloth to make sure that you keep that rear element gently nice and clean as well. Because what can happen is if you get a tiny little speck of dust on there, it might be represented as a blob in your image and you might think it's on your sensor, but it's actually probably more likely to be on that rear element just there. So keep them nice and clean. And Bernie, you are very welcome. As I see you said thank you just there. Okay, so let's pop Bernie's comment down and make sure everyone else is happy. Lovely. Let's take a look at the 1.2 45mm. Okay, so I'm going to bring this in. We'll go to this one here. Here we go. Now, this in comparison, obviously, is a much stockier product. So what we're looking at here is quite an exceptional jump up in size and weight. The reason for that being, as the 45mm f1.2 is a metal build, because this is a Pro Series lens. One quick thing that I want to point out to you guys, really, really important, and the reason for this is because I've got my my distance meter, my sort of depth of field meter exposed here on the lens, is that if we go back to the 45mm f1.8, this has an aperture range of f1.8, the maximum aperture, to f22, okay? Now, when we come over to the 45mm 1.2, the maximum aperture is f1.2 to f16, okay? So there's a slight reduction in how far we can stop this lens down. It goes f1.2 to f16. Now, again, obviously, this is a 90mm equivalent crop. There are 14 lenses in here. So we've gone from 9 lens elements in the smaller 45mm. There are now 14 lenses in this particular lens. And they're in 10 groups as well. So the more elements we're getting, then the more groups are likely to occur. I'm going to talk to you more about lens groups in a second. Again, 27 degrees angle of view, 9 aperture blades versus 7 in the previous 45mm. And again, this is on a circular aperture, despite the fact that this lens will produce feathered bokeh at f1.2. You're still using a circular diaphragm inside. If we take the rear of this off, you'll see, again, this is an absolutely superbly built piece of glass, but most people will look at it and think, how on earth have you got 14 lens elements in there? Well, that is the beauty of lens construction. And of course, the M.Zuiko lenses in particular are fantastic. The closest the closest focused on this one is exactly the same as the 1.8. So this is 50 centimeters again. And of course, you will find that written on the back of your lens here. So you can just about see this is in a light grey, 0.5 meters, which is 1.64 feet to infinity. It's got the Z coating. Okay, so Z coating is what we've put on this one, the Z nano coating with the nanoparticles, which traps the air and stops the reflected light from bouncing back and causing ghosting and flare. But it's also got a fluorine coating, which is great to protect against liquids. So liquids will run off this. It's like a hydrophobic coating. This lens is weather sealed, okay? So you get the benefit of the weather sealing if you're going to combine this with one of the weather sealed cameras, which is an EM5 series or an EM1 series camera. And we know that because if we take the rear lens cap off there, we will be able to feel that there is a rubber seal, a gasket all the way around the edges of this. Now, do be careful of this. Don't be tempted to sort of pick it or pull at it, because that is there to protect your lens and your camera against the elements. And of course, again, rear element, don't forget to keep that nice and clean as well. Again, no optical stabilization because it benefits from the camera's stabilization. The maximum magnification that this lens will produce is 0.1 times, incidentally, 0.11 times on the 45mm 1.8. So it's a fraction more magnification on the smaller lens. Now, the good thing about this lens is the thread diameter. So thread diameters can always be found on the side of your lens. If you're not sure what your internal thread diameter is for your filters, then you can look on the side here where you get all the information. So it's written on here. This is an Olympus M.Zuiko digital lens. It's a 45mm and it's a 1 to 1.2 F1.2 aperture rating, with a filter thread of 62. So that's that internal thread of 62. Now, all of the 1.2 Pro lenses have a 62mm filter thread. And of course, the new 8 to 25mm also does as well. So you can get quite a lot of filters that will match, one filter that will match quite a lot of your lenses if they have all that 62mm thread. And then in comparison, if we go back, we're looking at the 116 grams on the smaller lens. This is now 410 grams. So there is a substantial difference, but the jump in the quality is also quite substantial. Now, what I want to talk to you about is these main differences. So size and weight, okay? So we've got size and weight, metal versus polycarbonate. Color variations, of course, the Pro lenses are only available in the black, whereas this one is available in the black and silver. The F1.2 lens has an LFN button on the side. This is a lens function button. This can be programmed in the camera to be anything you want. A very popular programming function for this button would be things like focus peaking if you're going to use manual focus. Which brings me on to the fact that this has got the manual focus clutch. So that front ring, we can pull it back and we can push it forward. That means we're in autofocus and straight into manual focus. And then also we've got our distance meter as well, which can help us work out our depth of field in terms of hyperfocal distance. So pull back to manual focus, push forward for autofocus. Now, the F1.2 comes with a lens hood. Pop on here, it's just a simple twist on lens hood, nice and easy, and that's all of the Pro lenses that come with this is in an LH66B lens hood. That's fantastic. It's a single button to release, so we can twist that one and release off. At this stage, at this moment of time of broadcast, the 45mm 1.8 does not come with a lens hood, but there are lens hoods available for it. So the other difference that you've got, of course, is the aperture rating. We've got an f1.8 and an f1.2. That's one stop of difference. Now, this is really, really important. If you're going to be working in lower light, super important. If you really want to throw the depth of field, again, super, super important. Okay, so coming back to lens elements, okay? So let me just pop. We're just going to change our, there we go. Perfect stuff. So when it comes to lens elements, it's really, really important to understand that it's not always more is better, okay? So the lens elements are the individual glass pieces inside each lens, okay? And groups are when when two or more lenses are fixed together, okay? So you get 14 lenses in 10 groups. That means that at least 2, 3, or 4 of those lenses are fixed together in a group. But more doesn't always mean better, because these elements and groups have to work in conjunction with the quality of the glass itself and the build of the overall lens. So generally speaking, you'll find that bigger lenses have more lens elements, but not always are bigger lenses better lenses. So don't use that as a method of figuring out which is a better lens. Okay. Right, let's come back over to some questions. Let's see exactly what's going on, see where I left off. Here's a great one from Mr. Steve Williams. Hello, Steve. Good to have you in. A fantastic shot from your days at the racetrack by the looks of things. Thanks for joining us. Steve's asking if I have a tip for getting a screw-in filter off a lens when it's too tight to undo. Yes, very carefully. So it can be very difficult. The things you have to remember if you're going to use screw-in filters is finger tight only. These lenses do not need to be tightened up like a jar. We're not making that watertight at the end. It really is just finger tight only. However, obviously accidents can happen and filters can also bed in over time as those lenses are handled. Now, if you can't get those off by hand, it is better to see a professional. And in my opinion, and historically I've done it myself, is I've had to take a lens to a specific camera shop, a camera dealer, who has then asked me if it's all right to completely destroy the filter in order to save the lens. And what they will do is they will take a very specialized tool to that, otherwise known as some snip nose pliers, and they'll remove it for you. If it is on that tight, you really definitely should either find a camera store that can do it for you, or indeed send it to somebody who is better armed with tools to do that, and more than likely insured as well. So that's the thing, Steve, is be careful, but if you can't be careful, see a professional for sure. Okay, so just a quick hello to Margot. Hello, Margot. How are you doing? Hope you're well. Good to see you as always. Jojo says hello from the Phils. Hello, Jojo. And Howard's talking about rubber bands. That's got to be in relation to the screw-in filters. Perhaps it gives some good grip on there. That actually sounds like a really good idea, Howard. Actually, I'm going to try that the next time I get one stuck on my lens. Okay, Steve said he's bought a 45mm 1.8 and it's black with a silver trim. I'm assuming that's that top bit there. This top bit here is silver. So what's happened there is that somebody's gone into two boxes. They've gone into a box with a silver lens and they've pinched the little decoration thing on top and they've put it on one that's got a black lens in it. Probably. Excellent stuff. Okay. Right, so we talked about the F1.8 45 and the F1.2 45. Let me now bring in two other lenses. Very similar, yet so very, very different. So let's take a look at these here. Oh, let me just pop Steve's message down there. Perfect stuff. Okay, so we're coming across to the 25mm f1.2 and the 25mm f1.8. Now, with the 25 f1.2, you're going to see barely any difference between that and the 45. So very, very similar, almost identical in terms of size and weight. But of course, the main thing with this one is the focal length. And we're going to talk similar things with the 25 1.8 as well. So let's talk about the 1.8 to start with, because this is really, really important. Now, 25mm, let's pop that in the middle there. 25mm, it's a 50mm equivalent crop, okay? Now 50mm, we always talk about this and say, oh, it's a nifty 50, and 50mm is a fantastic, should be in everyone's photographic bag kind of crop or focal length. Now that's because generally, as the human beings that we are, we see the world at about 50mm. So if you take a photograph of something on a 25mm, which is micro four thirds version of 50mm, then the resulting image will look really, really normal to your brain, because it's generally how we kind of see the world. So everybody really should have a 25mm if you want to take normal, everyday, worldly snaps, which is why we were talking to Carlos earlier. Carlos was saying for street photography, this is kind of his go-to lens. Because of that focal length, it's perfect for street photography. It's perfect for really natural portraits as well, if you want a little bit of environment in there. So environmental portraits are superb on this lens. Okay, so you've got 9 elements in 7 groups on here. Your field of view now changes to 47 degrees. Okay, so 47 degrees field of view. Maximum magnification is 0.12 times, and closest focusing distance, as we can see down here, 0.25 meters. So they're ever so slightly closer than the 45mm. Generally speaking, we tend to see that the longer the focal length, the further the focusing distance. It's not an absolute rule, but it's a general kind of rule. You've got 7 aperture blades, again in a circular diaphragm, creating that nice circular bokeh that we see in kind of specular highlights and lights and things like that. Zero coating is the one on here. So this is the zero coating, by the way, stands for M.Zuiko Extra Low Reflection Optical Coating. And again, it's about reducing that refraction that's coming off the front element from your incident light. No optical stabilization because of the focal length, so it benefits from the one in the body. Because it's not a pro lens, it's not sealed, and this weighs in at 137 grams with a filter size of 46 millimeters. Now, interestingly, the hood is included in this one. So this lens is actually a bit of a benchmark in terms of historical digital Olympus products, because it was from this point on where we made the 25mm and onwards, any lens released or created after that date, not ones that were already produced, but ones that were created after, then would come with a lens hood. So this comes with a lens hood, and every lens released after it also always comes with a lens hood. And I know what you're thinking. Good. About time. That's right. Yes, all those lenses will come with your lens hoods. Now, of course, your 25mm does come with a lens hood as well. It comes with the same lens hood. It's the LH66B, which is fantastic. It's going to create that nice, lovely kind of weighty but kind of stumpy feel about it, which is good for most of the cameras. Really good on an EM1 series camera. Let's go back over to this and take the lens hood off and have a little look at the comparison for this one. So you've got 19 elements in this one, 19 optical elements all the way through there. I mean, you really wouldn't think so, would you? But there is 19 optical elements all the way through there, and they're in 14 groups, okay? It is, again, a nifty-50 crop, so it's a beautiful focal length so that your brain sees things normally. Absolutely weather sealed because it's a Pro Series lens. Again, 47 degrees field of view, and the closest focus on this one slightly further away than the 1.8 version, and this one comes in here at 0.3 meters or 30 centimeters or 0.8 feet to infinity. You've got 9 aperture blades in there, again with a circular diaphragm, but creating that feathered bokeh at f1.2, a max magnification of 0.11 times. Filter thread, again 62 millimeters, so it's matching up with the rest of those f1.2 lenses, so you can have one filter that fits all of them, and 410 grams. So, of course, also benefit from that lens function button on here. Really, really important to make sure that you do use your lens function button, because you've got so many functions within the camera. It's handy to have that where you hold the lens. When the lens is attached to the camera and you're holding the lens function button is here by your left thumb. So really, really easy to push and make the most out of one of those functions. Now, let's come up and see what's going on in the questions. Hope you're all still comfortable. Let's see what we've got here. Steve's asking, can I demonstrate the benefit in image of a pro lens over a non-pro lens? Yes, I'm going to do that in just a second, actually. We're going to move over to my camera that I've got over here. Now, obviously, we're still living with certain COVID restrictions, but I have managed to get a celebrity model in today. So get yourself excited over that, knowing full well it won't be as impressive as it sounds, but I will do a little demonstration of the two focal lengths for each lens. Okay, so let's have a little look. This is a great question. Michael Ellis. Hello, Michael. Obviously, you should change your lens with the camera turned off, but on occasions, I've swapped lenses without realizing the camera is switched on. Does it do any harm? Yes, it does. Ultimately, over time, if you change lenses with the camera switched on, what you're doing is you're exposing your electrically charged sensor to the elements. So if you're in an environment where there is lots of tiny floating dust particles, if you're not in a hermetically sealed room, then of course the sensor is going to attract all of those particles. Over time, it is going to create a problem. Now, every now and again as an accident, it's not going to be too much of a problem, but habitually you should try and make sure that your camera is switched off when you make those changes. Okay, Yvonne's got a great one for taking off filters. Look at this, use a rubber glove. A rubber glove on there, easier than elastic bands, get lots of grip, or you can use a rubber silicone disc-shaped jar opener. We have all the tips today. If you need tips, come to Tech Tuesday. The community's got them all. Yvonne, that's a fantastic tip. Okay, and Tor as well. Exactly, look at that. Great minds think alike. There we go. Now then, Tor is shouting Chewbacca. No, Chewbacca, my little Chewbacca, he's been present in some of our other tech videos. He's here. He's not our celebrity today. Chewbacca's having a rest. I'm going to put him back up over here. He does come in quite a lot, but I think we don't want to see Chewbacca too much. It's going to get a bit boring, so we have another celebrity to take the reins today. Okay, I'm going to switch on a camera over here, and then we're going to go over to, let me find a feed. Let's see if this one will do it. There we go. Fantastic stuff. Okay, so not much to see at the moment. Ultimately, what we're going to do with this, I'm going to start with the shorter focal length lenses on here. So let's just look at what we've got here. Just going to hit the menu. So let's go into the menu, make sure that we have everything working properly. This is a fully reset camera, by the way. Whenever I do, oh, there we go, I've given the game away. There's our celebrity for the day. Mr. Potter, not Chewbacca, sorry, Tor. Mr. Potter has joined us in his magical candlelit cave, just to give us a little help out with these today, because, of course, you can't bring any models into this very small studio space in which I work. So we've got Mr. Potter to help us. Now, this is a fully reset camera, so forgive the fact that we're running on JPEGs today. Just have a quick look at this. We have got my ISO set to 200 because I'm using constant lights. I've turned my face detect off because, believe it or not, the face detect knows that Mr. Potter is not a real person and it doesn't pick up his face. I'm using single autofocus, and I'm actually going to use spot metering. So even though we're talking about lens focal lengths and different lenses, let's talk about portraits and spot metering, very, very important. So let's select that. What you will see when I'm using spot metering, the only difference today you'll see is that the meter at the bottom, which is about, where's my lens? It's about, oh, here, where you can see my finger kind of coming in, about there, where it says plus 0.7. This is just a meter reading. The camera is telling me what reading it's getting from the spot, which is connected to my focal point. Now, if I move the spot over here to a darker area, then the meter's telling me that that's minus 2.7 on the reading. And if I bring it back over to Mr. Potter's eye, which is where we're going to focus from, it's plus 0.7 because I fixed everything else. I fixed the ISO, I fixed the shutter speed, and I fixed the aperture at f1.8. So it's just a reading, and I can use that reading to get a good image, or I could bring up a histogram, but I'm going to use the reading. I'm going to get this to plus 0.3 because as much as 0.0 is what the camera tells you is the perfect rating, I like to pop it a little bit with 0.3. And in order to bring it to 0.3, I'm just going to speed up my shutter a little bit, which stops some light out. So as you can see here, I'm running this at f1.8. You can see there's little fairy lights in the background. That's the bokeh. Let's take a shot of that there. Have a quick look. And what we should be seeing, if I just skip through the information on my playback by pressing the info button once and twice to clear it all away, we should have this really stunningly sharp, fantastic. This is the 25mm 1.8, super, super, super sharp. And then if we have a little look in our background, we've got some reasonably nice bokeh, bokeh or bokeh, however you'd like to say it. We've got some blobs in the background, which is where our specular highlights are. Now, of course, that bokeh is going to be different depending on the distance from the back of the subject to the lights and the distance from my lens to the subject, and all these things come into play. And also the focal length. So if I make it a longer focal length, I'll get greater balls of light. So this is our 25mm 1.2. Okay, so we're just going to keep that up for 1 second. We're going to switch over, and I'm actually doing something here that I've just told everybody not to do, and I'm actually switching lenses whilst shooting. But very quickly and very carefully, putting the 25mm f1.2 on. Let's have a look at this. So instantly when we have a look, even on a live view, we're seeing a slightly different shape of bokeh whilst still at f1.8, and that's because we're heading towards this feathered bokeh. If I wind it back now, we can see it's a little bit brighter. Now what I've actually got there is I've got a stop greater worth of light. If you see that, white value at the bottom where it says plus 1.3, this is the stop lighter, the stop brighter that this lens is. So I need now to wind that back a stop. So I'm going to go 3 clicks on my shutter speed faster. That gives me a stop. And I'm back to plus 0.3. But I've got 2 things that have happened by putting this Pro lens on. This is the difference that somebody was asking about earlier. By putting the Pro lens on, I've now got bigger, smoother bokeh in the background, but I've gained a stop worth of light. So my shutter speed has gone up to 100 from 50. So that's the benefit there, is I've doubled that shutter speed with 1 stop. Huge, huge benefits. Let's take a shot. And let's have a little look at the sharpness that we've got there. So what we're looking at effectively is the difference between, oh, I think I've actually moved the camera there. Let me get rid of that. There is some camera shaking there from me bobbling it around. I should really be using a shutter release for this one. There we go. Okay, so we've got the difference between this and this. There's very little difference in terms of the out of focus areas between the f1.8 and 1.2. But if we zoom back to our specular highlights, oops, we can go from that one. Oops, I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, that I may well have actually deleted the previous image. So we've lost our comparison. Let me pull back my 25mm f1.8 and bring that comparison back for you. This is another one of the joys of working live, having done it now for about 2 years. We kind of get used to it. Here we go. So I'll go to my 1.8, take that shot. Okay, that's better. So here's our 1.2, and you can see that lovely feathered bokeh, and there's our 1.8. So that's the dramatic difference for the bokeh in the background. Okay, I'm going to just leave that image up of the 25 f1.2, and I'm going to grab my 45mm f1.8 and 45mm f1.2. We'll go with the f1.8 first. We'll pop this back on. Straight away, when we go back to the live view, we're going to see a difference in the crop value. Okay, so let's have a look. There we go. We're much more cropped into Harry's face. So I'm going to move myself back quite considerably. And I'm just going to adjust my tripod a little bit. Now, normally at this stage, what I would do is I would turn my camera into a portrait aspect, but it doesn't work very well for the live stream for you all to see at home. So I'm just going to maneuver myself back. And there we go. So this is the change in the crop. So I've moved myself back. I've actually brought myself further back by about 2.5 feet to get a similar crop. So let's just have a look at the crop. So that's the crop we had there for the 25. Let's go back a bit more. So I'm now definitely closer to 3 feet further back. So I've gained myself some distance. I'm shooting at f1.8. Let's bring this back to something a little wider. This is my f1.8 version. So here, beautifully, now at f1.8 on the 45mm, we're getting more than f1.8 on the 25mm. So this is the difference. This is 25 1.8 and 45 1.8. So our bokeh, our compression, this compressed frame, this subject to background isolation is happening much, much better. And of course, we get the beautiful sharpness, and then we get the beautiful softness in the background. So really, really stunning. Like I said, this is that 45mm f1.8. Considering the size, considering the build, considering how much it costs to purchase, it really is such a phenomenal, phenomenal lens. And for many, many years, glued to my portrait camera. So we're going to swap over now to the f1.2. So let's go back to the live view. Straight away, the camera's decided to pop it to f1.2 for me, and we're seeing those feathered edges again. So let's take a nice clean shot. Oh, actually, we're back to having gained a stop of light, so we'll adjust the shutter speed again. 3 stops. We're getting up to 125th of a second now. Now, bear in mind as well, I have moved back. I've changed my composition, so parameters are slightly different to the first one because it's not a completely controlled environment. And there we go. So again, super, super beautiful detail. And then it starts to just drop out by the ears there, which is something that you always want. Keep your nose and your eyes in focus. And then we've got that beautiful, glorious bokeh in the detail in the background with the feathered edges. So 45 1.2, 45 1.8. This is that nice, beautiful comparison between those two lenses. Okay. So let's bring it back to the 1.2. I'm just going to move my camera back and resume my position so I can read some of your comments there. Mr. Potter, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it. We'll see you at Potter World, which is just down the road, about an hour, for any of you that like to be jealous. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of those comparisons physically in terms of depth of field and bokeh and things like that. Now, bear in mind that the situation that I'm working with today is, at most, with the 45mm, the camera is about 5 feet away from the subject, and then there's probably a further 4.5 to 5 feet from the subject to those fairy lights in the background. So we're working in quite a compressed area. So if you enhance that distance from subject to background and camera to subject, then of course that affects the bokeh, and the specular highlights will become bigger and rounder. Cindy's got a great question here, saying if one has the lovely 12 to 40mm lens, superb lens, how much better really will the 25mm prime be? So prime lenses are always going to give you a little extra sharpness in the corners. So if you imagine a zoom lens where elements are moving around in terms of zoom and focus, then the prime only does that in terms of focus. So you'll get sharper corners in the prime, and of course you're going from a 1.8 to a 2.8, so you're gaining quite an amount of light in there. So if you're shooting low light, that's one of the big things about these primes, about these fast primes. If you shoot a lot of consistently low light photography, they're the best ones to use really ultimately. But the 12 to 40 is a fantastic all-round capture everything lens. Okay, let's have a little look. Oh, let's say hello to John. John, I haven't seen your name for a while, and this seems to be why. John, Happy New Year to you as well. Sadly, you have not been very well. I hope you are feeling better. You're glad to see me mentioning the LFM button. Yeah, absolutely. It is a great way to show people how to hold the camera and lens correctly, because your thumb should be right about on that LFM button as well. So well pointed out. And yes, feel better, please do. Okay. Let's see. Roger's asking, Roger Rawson, let's see. I think it's got some nice random tech questions coming through now, so keep them coming for a few more minutes. Roger says, what's the best way to keep the focal point in the center? You've set home on the joystick, but a lot of the time the point keeps moving. That's a really, really good thing to point out. So effectively, ultimately, let me show you what happens. So let's just go to this overhead camera here. Let me move some things around so my desk gets more and more messy the more that I talk. So what tends to happen, this is an M1 Mark II, by the way, what tends to happen that's about to run out of battery, is that even though you've got the joystick up here on a Mark III, you might accidentally touch the up, down, left or right arrow keys around the OK button. And you might do that just while you're holding the camera randomly. And that's what can sometimes send this AF point off into the corner. So the best thing to do with this is to go into the menu, and you want to be basically in the B for button menu, in the button function menu. I know this is a bit bright for some of you. Is scroll down until you see, let me alter that actually. Let's bring that down so you can see it perfect. There we go. So the up, down, left, right function here, you should turn off. And if you turn that off, then you can't accidentally knock any of these. But if you're in a menu, say the super control panel, they do still work very, very nicely. So that is the best way to do that, Roger. I hope that helps. Let's pop that camera just over there. Okay, so Cindy, if I had to choose just one of these 4 lenses to use alongside a standard zoom, which would it be? I'm mentally crazy about portraits. It would be the 45mm f1.2 now, because the 45mm f1.8 was constantly with me when that was the only 45mm focal length from Olympus. So it would be the 45 1.2, Cindy, without a shadow of a doubt. This is a great question from Richard, something we might do in the future. Richard's asked, have you compared the 12 to 40 and the 12 to 45? I have in everyday shooting, but I'm going to put it on my list, and it's something that we can bring to you in a future session, hopefully. Johnny's saying that sometimes if you need 2 times the focal length, you shoot it in a JPEG. Yep, you can use the digital teleconverter to do that as well. And one more question, I think, before we bring the session to a close is from Christine saying, can you change functions using the touchscreen, or is it just via the buttons? You can use the touchscreen to activate different parts of the super control panel, but you still need to use the OK buttons to confirm them. And general functionality can only be assigned to physical buttons on the cameras. Hopefully that fully answers your question. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. The time flies in these tech sessions. They go super, super fast. And hundreds of you have sat and listened to me waffle on for about 45 minutes, which is fantastic. And I really appreciate that. This was our second Tech Tuesday of the year. This is our first focus on lenses session. So keep your eyes out for any more of those that are coming up. Also keep your eyes out for everything that all the other Olympus people will be doing, ambassadors and technical experts alike. I will be back next Tuesday with a look at the TG6 Tough camera and the weather sealing capabilities of the OMD range. And I'll have some more geeky specs and information on that for you. And maybe we'll do some little demonstrations on the TG6 as well. But for now, thank you, as always, for coming in and listening to me waffle on. Please come and listen to me waffle on again next week. But in the meantime, stay safe. And yeah, I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.